Emily, don't you think it's only right that you take good care of Sarah's child, even if she has special needs? I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. We were having a family meeting to discuss what to do with Jennifer, the 1-year-old daughter of my stepsister Sarah and her husband, who had tragically passed away in a car accident. But what Emily, my stepmother, said next shocked me to my core. A baby with developmental disabilities is defective. You raise her, she spat out, her words dripping with disdain. I'll gladly take her. I responded without hesitation, my heart breaking for the innocent child. And 20 years have passed. My husband Robert, our daughter Jennifer, and I were enjoying a celebratory dinner after Jennifer's coming-of-age ceremony when my phone rang. What's going on? Isn't that girl on TV? The voice on the other end demanded. That girl? I asked, feigning ignorance. Don't play dumb with me. Emily snapped, her tone as venomous as ever. I'm talking about Jennifer. Susan, why didn't you tell us anything? I heard she's going to study abroad at a famous university in France with a scholarship from a car manufacturer, recommended by a professor at her engineering college? Oh, right. I muttered, suddenly remembering that I hadn't informed my family about Jennifer's incredible achievement. I couldn't help but wonder how Emily, who had always ignored us, dismissing Jennifer as the developmentally disabled child and me as the foolish stepdaughter raising her, would react to this news. A smirk played on my lips as I imagined her shock and disbelief. My name is Susan, and I'm 45 years old. I live with my loving husband Robert and our remarkable daughter Jennifer, who just turned 20 this year. Jennifer is a junior in college this spring, but she's been busy preparing for her exciting study abroad opportunity in France starting in September. While our life is filled with joy and pride now, the journey to get here was far from easy. In fact, my life before marriage was anything but happy. And it was all because of the woman my dad remarried. About 40 years ago, my dad divorced my biological mother. Around that time, he had been seeing Emily, whom he eventually married, making her my stepmother. I was only 5 years old then. Emily brought along her daughter Sarah from a previous marriage. While Sarah and I quickly became close, my relationship with Emily was an entirely different story. Every chance she got, Emily would compare me to Sarah, scolding me, withholding my allowance, and refusing to buy me new clothes, blatantly favoring her biological daughter over me. However, I was a bit of an airhead, so it didn't bother me too much. But my nonchalant attitude seemed to fuel Emily's anger even more, creating a vicious cycle within our household. Sarah, being the perceptive person she was, quickly noticed the tension between Emily and me. She would worry about me, apologizing profusely with a guilty expression on her face, saying, I'm sorry. Whenever Emily showed blatant favoritism by buying things only for her or expressing concern about her future prospects. The situation only worsened after my younger brother Brian was born, with a 10-year age gap between us. Emily devoted all her attention to Sarah and Brian, practically ignoring my existence. Well, I suppose I should be grateful that being ignored was the extent of it. I found it bothersome, but it wasn't as painful as Sarah's guilt made it out to be. In reality, my grades weren't as good as Sarah's or Brian's, and I didn't particularly excel in anything. On top of that, I was mediocre in sports and had subpar health. But once I accepted that this was just the way things were, I made peace with it. As I watched the two of them go off to prestigious schools, I graduated high school and started working. It was there that I met Robert, a young man who worked for one of our client companies, and we got married when I was 23. Meanwhile, Sarah also got married and gave birth to her daughter, Jennifer, the following year. But here, our fates took a tumultuous turn. When Jennifer was just a year and a half old, Sarah and her husband tragically lost their lives in a car accident. Sarah was only 27 years young at the time. After their funeral, the question of what to do with Jennifer arose, and this is where things got complicated. Emily refused to take the child in. Normally, either the maternal or paternal grandparents would take custody, but Sarah's husband's family only consisted of his father, David. I can barely manage my own life, let alone take care of a baby. He dismissed the idea. She's cute and all, but it's impossible for me, he said. With that, the request fell on my parents, who were still together, but Emily was reluctant to take Jennifer in. Why can't you take Jennifer? I confronted Emily, which was rare for me. In response, Emily snorted, "Humph," and spat out her words with disdain. "This child may be Sarah's, but she's not good enough," Emily declared, her words dripping with disdain. Confused, I pressed further, "What do you mean by that?" "Sarah told me before," Emily continued, her voice laced with contempt. "She took the child to a specialist because something seemed off, and apparently, there's a problem with her." I remember Robert's knees trembling beside me as he listened to Emily's cruel words. "So you're saying you can't raise her because of that?" I asked, my disbelief growing by the second. "It's not that I can't raise her, I don't want to," Emily clarified, her tone as cold as ice. I was appalled. Those were certainly not the words a grandmother should be using to describe her own grandchild. "Just like you, a child who's not good enough isn't worth raising," Emily spat, her words hitting me like a physical blow. Rarely did I feel anger rising within me at Emily's words, but this time was different. You see, I was unable to have children of my own. After being married for a while and still not conceiving, I decided to investigate and discovered that I had issues with the development of my reproductive organs, making it difficult for me to have children. Now that it was mentioned, I had always had irregular periods and other related problems. I chastised myself a bit for not realizing sooner, but I had just come to terms with the fact that it couldn't be helped. However, if there was a child in need, I wasn't entirely opposed to the idea of raising them myself. That's why, in this moment, I uncharacteristically confronted Emily, who I usually never argued with. "Emily, don't you think it's only right that you take good care of Sarah's child, even if she has special needs?" I asked, my voice trembling with a mixture of anger and disbelief. But Emily's response left me even more shocked. "I absolutely cannot stand the idea of raising a child with developmental disabilities," she exclaimed, her face twisting with disgust. Developmental disabilities. Those words pierced my heart like thorns. It was something I realized about myself later on, but my slow movements and frequent small mistakes at work were likely due to my own struggles with developmental disabilities to some extent. "So, Emily, are you saying you don't want to take her in because she's not good enough or because she has developmental disabilities?" I asked, seeking clarity amidst the confusion. "That's right, that's what it comes down to," Emily confirmed, her tone matter of fact. "Sarah and Brian have always been such excellent children. It was a joy to raise them. So that means even me." I trailed off, the implication of her words sinking in. "Of course." Emily raised her eyebrows as if it were obvious. "If you had shown even a bit of promise, I would have raised you the same way I did Sarah and Brian. But what about you? From the moment I first met you, you couldn't even respond properly, always spacing out." It seemed she had written me off from the very beginning. At this point, my dad, who had been listening silently beside us, finally spoke up. "Hey now, that's not something you should be saying." He chastised Emily, attempting to defuse the situation. But I knew well that Dad's words weren't a true reflection of his feelings. He had essentially left me in Emily's care and ignored me for the most part. I had already heard rumors that it was because I bore a strong resemblance to my biological mother, whom he had divorced. So, by the time I entered middle school, I had come to understand that I shouldn't expect anything from Dad's attitude towards me. When I was living at home, Sarah and Brian were the only ones I considered family. After getting married, Robert became a new addition, but those three were the only ones on my side. Sarah was always kind to me. Influenced by Sarah's warmth, Brian would also cling to me, saying, "Susan, Susan." So when this conversation came up, Brian was the only one who got angry, exclaiming, "What are you saying, Mom?" Perhaps emboldened by his voice, I further confronted Emily. "So what do you suggest we do with Jennifer then?" Emily thought for a moment, then threw these words at me with a mocking expression. "You raise the defective baby with developmental disabilities. I'll gladly take her." I found myself responding without hesitation. I was thrilled to have elicited those words from Emily. I remember Emily making a terribly strange face, likely not expecting such a reaction from me. After this discussion, Brian said to me, "That must have felt good. But are you really sure about this, Susan?" Brian was only 15 years old at the time. exactly 10 years younger than me. It's okay. I've always wanted a child, and my husband, he's very understanding about many things. You know how I can be a bit stupid sometimes, right? He's the kind of person who will teach me about things I don't understand. I see. Plus, it's thanks to Sarah and Brian that I was able to breathe somewhat easily at home. So I want to do for this child what Sarah did for me, as much as I can. At that, Brian nodded vigorously. If that's what you want, Susan, then all right. But it might still be tough. So if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know, he said. I was delighted by my younger brother's thoughtfulness and gave Brian a light pat on the shoulder. It was true that Sarah's daughter, Jennifer, had shown signs of developmental disabilities from the very beginning. As an infant, she would shy away from physical contact and was sensitive to sounds. As she grew a bit older, she would engage in repetitive behaviors, such as continuing an activity for an extended period once she started. So, Robert decided to take Jennifer for an early assessment. On top of that, Robert made a suggestion. Let's also look into our own tendencies together, he said. Robert had always been personally interested in this field. I have quite a few friends with uneven characteristics like that. They stood out in class, but they were interesting guys in many ways. So, after getting tested myself, I understood the meaning behind my own slowness. Intelligence tests reveal 4 characteristics, and while my abilities to observe and think, verbal comprehension and perceptual reasoning, were average, I was slightly lacking in the areas of working memory, which allows for multitasking, and processing speed, the ability to complete tasks quickly. In other words, you'll be fine if you avoid multitasking and work steadily at your own pace, Robert explained. Meanwhile, Robert himself had a well-balanced, above-average profile overall. As expected, Jennifer's test scores varied widely. Her verbal comprehension and perceptual reasoning were exceptionally high. However, her working memory and processing speed were borderline average. When this discrepancy is severe, even if the overall IQ is good, it can make life more challenging. So, I decided to take raising this child seriously and quit my job. I had been continuing to work without any particular reason to quit, so that part went smoothly. As a stay-at-home mom, I was able to understand my own characteristics through the test results. Under the guidance of a doctor, I improved my household efficiency and didn't hesitate to seek outside help for childcare when multitasking was unavoidable. As Jennifer grew up, she would often misinterpret questions and draw criticism from school teachers, adults in the neighborhood, and friends. But whenever a problem arose, we promptly addressed it. With this approach, Robert and I simply did our best together with Jennifer. By the way, Jennifer knew from quite an early age that I wasn't her real mom. And she accepted that fact matter-of-factly. It's a bit strange, but that seems to be how she processes things. She smoothly entered and graduated from middle school and high school, and even got accepted straight into the engineering university of her choice within commuting distance. Then, last year, despite being only a college sophomore, she suddenly announced that a professor from her department seminar had recommended she go to France and attend university there, though I don't know where or how they met. This is the first I'm hearing of this. Is it really true? I asked, my eyes wide with surprise. Yeah, is it not okay? Jennifer asked, in the same tone she would use when asking if she could go on a trip or go shopping in town. Oh, and apparently they'll handle the paperwork for a scholarship that I don't even have to pay back for the expenses, she added casually. Really? I exclaimed, my eyes widening in surprise. My astonishment wasn't so much about the fact that she would save on tuition, but rather that Jennifer had something special enough to warrant such an offer. To be honest, I didn't fully understand what Jennifer was studying at school. I wasn't particularly smart myself and had no interest in academics. Especially when it came to the engineering, or rather, the sciences that Jennifer was majoring in, I couldn't even comprehend middle school textbooks. Robert was more of a humanities person, so while I couldn't relate, nowadays he would look at Jennifer's studies and mutter, "That's amazing." So while I couldn't offer advice or consultation on the contents of her interests, I could at least support Jennifer as she rapidly developed various passions. If there was something Jennifer wanted to do, Robert and I were determined to help her expand on that as much as possible. When Robert heard this news, he was overjoyed, of course. The study abroad was set to begin after the summer break of Jennifer's junior year in college, and our lives continued as we steadily prepared for it. Then, as the new year began, it was time for Jennifer's coming-of-age ceremony. As we marveled at how splendidly Jennifer had grown up, my phone suddenly rang while we were eating out. Wondering what it could be, I glanced at my mobile phone and saw that it was from my parents' house. On closer inspection, I realized that I hadn't noticed because I had suppressed the ringtone, but 20? No, 30? Many missed calls. I wonder what's going on so suddenly. I exchanged glances with Robert and Jennifer. They both sensed something was off. In the 20 years since we had started raising Jennifer, we rarely received calls from my parents' house except for family gatherings. Anyway, why don't you answer it? Robert suggested. You're right. I agreed, pressing the call button. Hello, this is Susan, I greeted. Oh, Susan, what have you been doing? I've called so many times, and you didn't answer. You're as slow as ever. Emily's sharp tone pierced through the phone. Her voice was so loud that even Robert and Jennifer, who were nearby, could overhear it. I'm sorry, I'm out right now. I explained, trying to keep my tone polite despite the rising irritation I felt at Emily's accusing words. Oh, for heaven's sake, Susan, always with the excuses. Emily scoffed, her voice dripping with disdain. I apologize. Anyway, what can I do for you? I asked, not wanting to engage with Emily's condescending attitude. The TV. I saw it on TV. What's going on? Emily demanded, her voice rising with each word. Huh? TV? I asked, genuinely confused. It was just on. The evening news program. They had a segment on the coming-of-age ceremony, didn't they? Emily pressed, her tone growing more agitated by the second. Coming-of-age ceremony segment. Ah. Her words jogged my memory, and I recalled the local station's evening news program. I'm sorry, I've been out, so I haven't seen it. Was there something in particular? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm and even. What do you mean? That girl was on TV, wasn't she? Emily snapped, her patience clearly wearing thin. That girl? I repeated, still not quite sure what she was getting at. From the other end of the line, Emily's voice grew even louder, tinged with anger and frustration. Don't play dumb with me. She spat, her words sharp and biting. Meanwhile, Jennifer pulled out her cell phone and started tapping away at the screen. I'm talking about Jennifer. Susan, why didn't you tell us anything? I heard she's getting a scholarship from a car manufacturer to study abroad at a famous university in France, recommended by her engineering college professor? Emily's voice was a mixture of accusation and disbelief. Oh. I trailed off, suddenly remembering that I hadn't mentioned anything to my family back home. From the other side of the phone screen, Emily's voice boomed, loud enough to make me wince. Honestly, what is wrong with you? Why wouldn't you tell us about such an important thing? Hey, Mom, is it about this? Jennifer asked, showing me a video with the sound turned down. It seemed to be from our state's local news program. All right, now let's visit this research lab, the reporter announced, walking into what appeared to be a university laboratory. And there, standing alongside a professor and an assistant, was Jennifer, dressed in the same elegant outfit she had worn to the coming-of-age ceremony earlier that day. Wait, this happened today? I asked, my eyes widening in surprise. Yeah. Jennifer confirmed with a nod, a hint of excitement and pride shining in her eyes. It turns out the segment featured promising young people that the TV station found noteworthy among this year's coming-of-age ceremony participants. Why didn't you let us know about the study abroad? Emily demanded, her voice dripping with accusation. I sighed, already feeling exhausted by this conversation. Emily, I didn't think you'd be interested. I replied honestly, trying to keep my tone neutral. But still, to be on TV. Oh, I could have bragged to the neighbors. Emily lamented, her priorities as skewed as ever. What do you mean? Jennifer asked, giving me a puzzled look. Ah, of course. To her, being on TV wasn't a big deal, I realized. Come to think of it, for Emily's generation, just being on TV is a huge event. Robert murmured, echoing my thoughts. Jennifer looked surprised. It was true, though. When I was a child, we would make a huge fuss whenever a TV crew came to our neighborhood. And when it aired, my siblings and I would be glued to the screen. Nowadays, with anyone able to post videos online, young people aren't fazed by something like a local TV interview, and even I don't feel as strongly about it as I used to. But for Emily's generation, appearing on broadcast television is still a monumental occasion. The kind of thing you'd want to go around telling all your neighbors about, just to brag. Incidentally, Emily is also a huge show-off. But that doesn't mean I have any obligation to report every little thing to her. Come on, Emily, you never cared about Jennifer before. You didn't even bother asking which college she was going to ever since high school. So why would I need to go out of my way to tell you? I pointed out, my patience wearing thin. Well, sure, but... Emily's voice took on a flustered tone. I never imagined in a million years that she'd be going to the engineering university. It has the highest deviation value for science majors in the state. Even Brian couldn't get in there. That was true. The engineering university Jennifer attends boasts the top deviation value for science majors in the state. It's a big deal even on a national level. And the state we live in has a thriving auto industry, which is actually relevant to Jennifer's study abroad opportunity. A plan that Jennifer came up with on her own and proposed to her professor somehow made its way into the hands of an engineer at a major car manufacturer, and that's how the scholarship offer came about. Jennifer mentioned it so casually, but in reality, even Robert was stunned when he heard the full story. I never imagined a child with developmental disabilities could get into a school like that. Or was the diagnosis wrong? Emily sputtered, her disbelief palpable. No, the diagnosis was correct. Jennifer does have developmental disabilities. I confirmed, my voice calm and even. In fact, thanks to that, when Jennifer's strong preferences made parenting too much for me to handle with my difficulty multitasking, I was able to ask for help from caregivers. But how on earth did a child with developmental disabilities get into such a good school? Emily demanded, her voice rising with each word. I don't know what to tell you. We just nurtured her strengths and supported her in areas where she struggled. I explained patiently, trying to keep my own frustration in check. What strengths are you talking about? Emily pressed, clearly not satisfied with my answer. I felt a flicker of doubt. Even if I mentioned things like verbal comprehension, this person wouldn't be easily convinced. So I decided to be blunt and continued. To be honest, I don't really understand the details of what Jennifer is studying. You don't understand? Emily's voice rose even higher, tinged with disbelief and judgment. You know very well that I'm not that smart either, Emily, I reminded her, my tone matter of fact. Well, that's certainly true, but... Emily sputtered, caught off guard by my candor. She had always been like this towards me, calling me stupid, an idiot, and other such things without reservation. You're Jennifer's mother and you're okay with that? It's fine. After all, this child is working hard to do what she wants to do. It's not like I did anything special, right? I reassured her, a smile tugging at the corners of my lips. But still, Emily tried to interject, but I cut her off. All right then, I'm going to hang up now, I said firmly, not giving her a chance to continue her tirade. Wow, that was intense, Jennifer remarked, staring at the phone in disbelief as the call ended. A little over 6 months later, the day arrived for Jennifer to leave for France with her professors. Robert and I went to see her off at the international airport in our state. Jennifer, are you sure you'll be okay? I asked, my voice tinged with a mixture of worry and pride. Probably, Jennifer replied in her usual calm, unflappable manner. She might not be okay, but we'll deal with that when the time comes, the professor said with a smile, his tone reassuring as he acknowledged Jennifer's strength and resilience. The assistant accompanying them couldn't help but chuckle at his words, a knowing look in his eyes. As the wait time at the airport was long, we were spending it chatting about various things at a cafe. But that's when it happened. Jennifer, so this is where you were, a voice called out, catching me by surprise. Emily? I gasped, my eyes widening in disbelief. Huh? Jennifer turned to me, her brow furrowed in confusion. The moment they spotted us, Emily and Dad came rushing over, accompanied by several women around Emily's age. "Who are they, Mom?" Jennifer asked, her voice low and uncertain. "Your grandpa and grandma, and I'm not sure about the others," I replied, my own confusion mounting. "Could they be those supposed neighbors?" Robert wondered aloud, his tone skeptical. We whispered our questions to each other on the spot. But what surprised me was how unusually dressed up Dad and Emily were. "Wait a minute. Dad, Emily, what on earth is going on?" I demanded, stepping in front of Jennifer protectively. "Oh, come now, there's no need to be so reserved, Susan," Dad chided, waving off my concerns with a dismissive hand. As I struggled to make sense of the situation, Dad continued, his voice tinged with accusation. "You know, Emily told me that even after contacting you during the coming-of-age ceremony, you never bothered to get in touch with us. Oh, and I recorded that local program too, so I saw it myself. Why didn't you come home to talk about something like that?" "Honestly, she's always been such a thoughtless child," Emily chimed in, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Oh, and these are our neighbors. They went out of their way to come here, hoping to meet our genius granddaughter just once." Genius?" I sputtered, my disbelief reaching new heights. What on earth was that about? I wondered, utterly flabbergasted. Just a short while ago, they had acted as if a child with developmental disabilities couldn't possibly have any abilities, refusing to even try to contact us. But now, this? To be honest, after the coming-of-age ceremony, we had been bombarded with an onslaught of phone calls, to the point of being harassed. I had reached out to my younger brother Brian about this, asking him to tell them to refrain from calling. Although Brian was married and had left home, he still held some sway over our parents. After all, he was their one and only son. But it seemed that even for Brian, our family home was not a comfortable place to be. He had once told me, "I loved both you and Sarah, so I hated how Mom blatantly discriminated against you. And on top of that, she pushed Jennifer onto you, remember? That's when I completely gave up on Mom." Having witnessed such a scene at the tender age of 15, Brian, like me, had lost all faith in our parents. Emily's phone harassment had been so severe that I had no choice but to rely on Brian to intervene. "Everyone here wants to know how you raised her to be like this," Emily pressed, gesturing to the gaggle of neighbors behind her. "That's not something you ever bothered to ask about before," I replied coldly, my patience wearing thin. "Hey now, isn't that a bit rude?" Dad chided, his tone disapproving. "Rude? Emily's the one who didn't contact us for 20 years until this coming-of-age ceremony, except for family gatherings, isn't she?" I retorted, refusing to be cowed by his admonishment. Dad turned to Emily with a look of surprise, as if seeing her in a new light. "That's not true at all," Emily protested, a fake smile plastered on her face as she turned to address the professors sitting nearby. "It's a pleasure to meet you. I'm Jennifer's grandmother. We're so grateful for everything you've done for our granddaughter," she gushed, attempting to ingratiate herself with Jennifer's mentors. Murmurs of "professor" rippled through the crowd behind us. The professor looked at Emily with a startled expression, then asked in a calm, pleasant tone, "Oh? Could you be the person Jennifer mentioned who refused to take care of her granddaughter because of her developmental disabilities and instead pushed her onto her stepdaughter? Well, what are you?" She sputtered, clearly caught off guard. "Professor, she's not used to people being so direct," Jennifer explained matter-of-factly. "Ah, my mistake. You did mention that, didn't you?" the professor acknowledged, nodding his head in understanding. "Yep, I definitely said that. Facts are facts, after all," Jennifer confirmed, her tone neutral and unflappable. "That's right, facts are important." The assistant chimed in, giving me a wry smile as if to say, "What should we do?" I responded with a silent nod, conveying my agreement to let things play out as they were. These two were birds of a feather. I had heard that among those who became university professors, there were occasionally types like this. While they were brilliant and confident when it came to their own research, they often had some major quirks or eccentricities in other areas. Having had dinner with the professor at our home a few times to discuss Jennifer's situation, I honestly felt like there were two Jennifers present. Once the two of them started conversing, my husband and I couldn't keep up at all. Not only was the subject matter highly technical, but the content of their conversation was incredibly condensed. And the leaps in logic were astounding. Eventually, they would become so engrossed in their discussion that they would often be surprised to find that the table had been cleared without them noticing. Apparently, the professor was also a man of action. He had told an acquaintance who worked at the manufacturer's research lab about Jennifer in great detail. He mentioned how she was a rare student who had started attending his seminars and actively participating in discussions since her freshman year of college. He even shared the specific topics she had brought up and the plans she had proposed, engaging in thorough small talk about her. This information had made its way further up the research lab's hierarchy, and they had offered to provide a scholarship, seeing her as a valuable future asset.
"He's quite unconventional, isn't he?"
The assistant remarked with a wry smile, apparently accompanying the professor to provide support. Well, from an outsider's perspective, he would certainly be considered a difficult person to deal with. I honestly thought that if this professor lived nearby, it would be quite troublesome for me. After all, he was the type of person who could suddenly bring up the topic of Emily in such a loud voice.
No, that's not true at all. I asked Susan to take care of our granddaughter because she couldn't have children of her own,"
Emily insisted, her face strained as she frantically denied the accusation. The professor, however, remained unfazed.
"Well, you see, I have quite a good memory. Jennifer had already mentioned this when she first started attending my seminars way back when. And Jennifer herself has an excellent memory, too," he pointed out matter-of-factly.
"Yeah, my memory is the one thing that's good. That's right, Grandma abandoned me when I was a year and a half old, didn't she?" Jennifer chimed in, her tone casual and unsurprised.
You remember that? From back then?"
Emily stammered, staring at Jennifer in shock.
"Well, I don't remember it directly, but I do remember everything about the photos of me that we have at home. There aren't any from before I was a year and a half old. Which means you wouldn't let us bring any earlier ones home, right? Because of the photos of my previous mom? I just put together the timeline, that's all," Jennifer explained, her voice calm and matter-of-fact.
"Huh?" Emily looked stunned, clearly struggling to process Jennifer's words. It seemed that Jennifer's explanation had been a bit too concise.
"In other words, Emily, when you took this child in, you didn't let her bring a single photo of Sarah with her, did you?" I clarified, my tone pointed and accusatory.
I don't recall anything like that," Emily sputtered, her face paling. "That's what this child is talking about. Because you hoarded all the photos of Sarah, regardless of whether Jennifer was in them or not, we don't have a single cute baby photo of Jennifer from birth to a year and a half," I continued, my voice rising with each word.
At this, the neighbors behind us started murmuring and whispering amongst themselves.
"Oh yeah, I think I was about 7 at the time." "That's right, I asked Uncle about it,"
Jennifer suddenly blurted out, as if realizing that her previous explanation had been lacking.
"When I called Uncle, he said there were photos, but Grandma wouldn't give them to us. When I asked why, Uncle told me. He said Grandma loved my previous mom who had passed away so much that she wanted to keep those photos for herself. So even the ones with me in them were off limits. That's why I don't have a single photo of my real mom."
The commotion behind us grew even louder.
"Not even a single photo of her real mom? She went that far?"
"Oh, now that I think about it, I remember Susan often being left behind when everyone else went on trips."
It seemed the neighbors had good memories too.
"I see, so that's what Brian was talking about. He did a good job, didn't he?"
I muttered, feeling a strange sense of amusement. Emily overheard my comment and glared at me.
"What did you just say?"
she demanded, her voice sharp and accusatory.
"Emily, do you even understand why Brian left home in the first place? It's not like his workplace is that far away."
I shot back, my patience wearing thin.
"Well, what are you talking about?" Emily sputtered, her face turning pale. "I'm saying that he probably got embarrassed by his own mother, who had always treated me like an idiot and pushed away this child after hearing about her developmental disabilities,"
I explained, deliberately speaking slowly and clearly. I wanted to make sure the people behind us could hear every word. Jennifer, picking up on my cue, chimed in with her own rapid-fire commentary.
"Anyway, I'm not really sure why you're here, Grandma, but you don't need to contact me at all from now on. I mean, I don't really care about you, and I don't want to have a relationship with you in the future. Yeah, even if there's a funeral, I probably won't go,"
she said casually, her tone light and unbothered. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Then, as an afterthought, I added, "Hey, that's a bit much, Jennifer. But..."
"Sorry, I just said the truth," Jennifer replied, not sounding sorry at all.
The looks on Dad and Emily's faces at that moment were priceless. Well, after that, they would come to learn the hard way that the fish they had let slip away was not only big but would also leave behind a terrifyingly large ripple effect. Apparently, someone had recorded our exchange with Dad and Emily at the airport, and it had gone viral on social media. Never underestimate the power of the evening news. For people in rural areas, local TV programs are something they look forward to, regardless of age. It's a separate issue from whether or not you appear in the videos, but the programs themselves that pick up information within a familiar range have always been beloved. The kids who saw Jennifer, whose face was clearly shown and whose background had become glamorous, on that local program must have recorded it, saying, "That's her." Even without that, if someone were to witness such a bizarre altercation at the airport, they might feel compelled to record it. The video contained clear audio, so the phrase,
"abandoned because of developmental disabilities,"
had quite a large impact in this day and age. To put it simply, it garnered attention in no time. After seeing Jennifer off and returning home, Robert happened to check his social media and let out a gasp.
"Oh!"
He had spotted the term developmental disabilities trending, and when he investigated further, lo and behold, it was a video of us. The sheer number of reactions and comments was astounding. Robert and I couldn't help but look at each other and burst into laughter. The next day, we received numerous calls from my parents' home again. It was too much of a hassle, so we let the answering machine handle it. In the messages, Emily could be heard ranting loudly.
"Please, get that video deleted."
As if that were even possible. According to Brian, it seemed that Emily hadn't been able to leave the house recently. Apparently, it started with the neighbors of her generation who were present at the scene. They had thoroughly connected the viral video with what they had witnessed and shared it with the younger members of their families. Those younger folks then spread the word through reviews, saying things like,
"The lady of that house pushed her developmentally disabled grandchild onto her stepdaughter."
Attitudes towards developmental disabilities have changed quite a bit in the past 20 years. Emily's behavior would certainly not be tolerated in this day and age. As a result, her former bravado had vanished, and she was said to be spending her days holed up at home. Dad, finding it unbearable to listen to Emily's constant complaints, had taken to calling us instead. As someone who was thoroughly screening calls with the answering machine, it was none of my concern. After all, Dad had done nothing to help me when Emily was bullying me. I figured he could at least take care of Emily himself.
"Hey Mom, I got my room assignment here. I went to see the school."
Ever since she arrived, Jennifer has been contacting us every day.
"The campus is so huge,"
she would say, or,
"French, once you're there, you can somehow manage."
She would go on and on about various things. To be honest, it had been a crash course in French conversation since her study abroad was decided, but it seemed like her efforts were paying off. She had always had a good memory to begin with. And she possessed analytical skills and guts. She seemed grateful that she didn't have to be so considerate as much as she did in America. Perhaps such a foreign environment was comfortable for Jennifer.
"Hey Mom, I'll really call you every night,"
Jennifer would say. But I would reply, "Yeah, well, just do it when you have time." "Don't say that. I'll be lonely," she would protest. "But you'll quickly become engrossed in your research, won't you?" I pointed out.
"Yeah, I probably will," she admitted.
"I'm sure you will." I agreed. "But it's true that I'll miss you, Mom, so don't forget that," she reminded me. "Of course," I assured her. With those words, I ended the call with my daughter across the ocean. And I thought to myself from the bottom of my heart, I'm so glad I took this child in. For a while, it would just be Robert and me living together, but if the time ever came for Jennifer to return home, I would make all of her favorite foods. Because I am her mom, after all.